Hello, my name is Desiree, and I am here for another episode of the Groundbreaking Grief series. And today I have a special guest um, where we're going to talk to Christopher Leibel. He is an elder care advisor with Senior Care Authority here in the Atlanta metro area. And he and I met through some networking groups that I'm in. And I wanted to just bring him onto our series to talk about how grief shows up in his work, part of us deconstructing grief and not being afraid to talk about how it shows up in our lives. So, welcome, Chris. How are you today?
I'm good, Desiree. Thank you for having me.
All right. So, do you want to take a moment and just share a little bit about what you do and how you help families find their best options for caring for elders in their family?
Absolutely. Sure. So I'm a elder care advisor, and usually I work with families, and families get referred to me when they have an issue around elder care.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, most of the time, it's when there's a crisis going on. Um, they've got a loved one that's ended up in the hospital and they don't know how to navigate that whole entire process, all of the different steps in terms of discharge planning and rehab and post rehab. And I help families navigate that. The best time is when I'm meeting with families who are actually planning for elder care. They recognize that there's something that needs to be done, and I can help them navigate the all of the options. And at the bottom line, really what I do is that I help families ensure that their loved ones are in a safe and secure care environment so that they can experience a sense of self-esteem and they can experience a sense of dignity as they age. And at the end of the day, that is my goal and that is my mission.
Yeah. Dignity is so important in when you're caring for someone in your family, whether they have an illness or if they're just simply just experiencing, what someone once described as the November or December of their lives when they are, aging and things are changing and sometimes they're losing control. One of the things that I really frequently talk about when I work with clients is respecting the dignity of the person at the center of that experience. So I'm curious, how do you see grief showing up in your work, Chris?
Grief shows up in my work, I would say, in two main ways. The first one is probably the more obvious, and that's because I'm working with families that are caring for older loved ones,
Mhm.
and my relationship with these families, it can go on for many years, and a lot of times what ends up happening is that I help families navigate the whole journey from assisted living to hospice, and then helping them to navigate what happens when their loved one eventually transitions,
Mhm.
and you know, helping them to manage those feelings and emotions that they're having when somebody that they've been caring for sometimes years and years and years um, ends up passing. So, I play a part in that process, very often from a logistics perspective, helping them to navigate some of the details, and often referring them to people in my network that are grief specialists.
Mhm.
They call themselves bereavement specialists, and I have people in my network that we refer to that can manage those different steps. The second area that shows up, and this is something that's a little less obvious, and that is that a lot of my clients I have a loved one that's living with dementia.
Mhm.
And we call dementia the disease of ambiguous loss. And the reason that we call it the disease of ambiguous loss is because you kind of never know what's around the corner with dementia. You know, you've got a baseline, and then there's some kind of an event, and that person's baseline suddenly declines very, very quickly. And we put different things in place in order to help them improve, and they'll improve, but the new baseline is actually lower than the previous baseline before they had the event. So there's this loss. And all of the people that love that person experience that loss. And as you know better than anybody, you know, that results in a kind of grief.
Mhm.
It's not the kind of grief that somebody experiences when they permanently lose somebody, but there is that loss in steps. You know, somebody who used to be a phenomenal chef and used to make these grand dinners and no longer has the ability to do that. And
Mhm.
that's my own personal experience with my mother who's living with Alzheimer's disease. She was a brilliant, brilliant cook. I got my passion for cooking because of her. And she'd make these grand Thanksgiving dinners, and she loved to cook. And once the Alzheimer's disease, as she began to advance through the disease, we lost that.
Mhm.
And my sister and I and all of our family members, you experience that sense of loss. And that's a small example, but things continue to get more emotional throughout that process. And
Yeah, it
I help the family members that I'm working with through that process of ambiguous loss. And really, what I help them to do is prepare them for how emotional that is.
Mhm.
Um, Nothing ever really, even as a professional, and my own mother's living with Alzheimer's disease. I'm helping people, other families navigate it. It's different when it hits home and it's personal. But
Yeah.
to be prepared for it and to help them understand that these are some of the things that can happen takes a bit of the sting out of it. And it helps people put the different things in place that they need to have in place to help their loved one live with as much dignity as they possibly can as they're going through these different series of losses.
Yeah. So it's almost like a living loss. Like the term that I've heard in my grief training is a it's a loss before you lose, like the person physically ends their journey on this planet. And so it's anticipatory grief is in little small steps. And my mom had ALS, which was a terminal illness. It's different than Alzheimer's, but we did have those little bitty losses, and our baseline would shift from day to day. And sometimes it would take a significant downshift. And then you're reevaluating and you're scrambling to adapt. And so it's this adaptability, but it's being a caregiver for someone experiencing that type of illness is exhausting emotionally and can be exhausting physically. And I don't think that people are necessarily prepared for the emotional exhaustion. I don't think that they necessarily give credence to how tired this type of work can make them.
You know,
And
Desiree, to that point, it can also be, in some instances, a bit dangerous. And the reason I say that is because very often you have spouses that are in their 80s,
Mhm.
and you've got one spouse that's living with dementia, and then you've got the other spouse that's in their 80s who's the caregiver. And time again, we see the healthy spouse, we see their health decline
Hmm.
pretty dramatically because of all of that emotional stress that they're trying to manage, just like what you just said. And they're not prepared for it. And very often, I spend a lot of time helping the adult children understand that we're doing all this stuff for mom because she's living with Alzheimer's disease. We also have to prioritize the health of your dad.
Yeah.
And he's operating out of a sense of duty. He's operating out of this sense of this is what it means to be a husband. I'm going to stick through it. My grandmother, unfortunately, also passed away from Alzheimer's disease. And my grandfather, he was her caregiver, and he ended up passing away before she did. And he was this robust person, lived up in the Adirondacks, and he was always active. And when his health began to decline, and he couldn't go out in the woods, and couldn't go hunting, and couldn't go out in the back and chop wood and do all these things, it took a really huge emotional toll on him. So that's something that we can't underestimate, and that's how powerful those emotions can be
Hmm.
surrounding that grief. And everybody has to take care of themselves to be the best caregiver that they possibly can be.
Yeah, and that can be hard, especially when the to-do list seems never ending, which is where someone like you is so valuable to families because you can help to relieve some of that burden of let me help you organize these thoughts and help you understand what might be coming up in terms of the emotions and some things that you may not be seeing because when we're in it it's so much harder. I mean, that's the beauty of some of the work that I do is you can't see the label when you're in the jar is it something that we say frequently in coaching. And when you're so close to this situation, like you kind of pointed to that earlier, when you're walking through it in your own family, sometimes it can be hard to keep that objectivity of this is the best decision. And I think that families really wrestle with, I don't want to put my loved one in a facility, or I have I made a promise when we got married that I would take care of this person and this is my duty, but they're not realizing that their health and their exhaustion, both physical and emotional, could come into play and maybe jeopardize the safety of their loved one that they're caring for. And that can be hard to realize that.
It's extremely hard. There is a tremendous amount of guilt
Hmm.
that adult children have that's associated with moving their mother or father into a senior living environment. And sometimes there's even guilt. Let's say, for instance, it's not senior living. Let's just say, for instance, we're going to age in place at home.
Hmm.
And mom says, we don't want to have anybody coming into the home. And meanwhile, they've lost their mobility. They're not driving anymore. So the son or the daughter ends up, setting their life on the back burner in order to accommodate that.
Hmm.
But the issue is that the life of that older adult who is living with food insecurity, immobility, the lack of social interaction, the lack of recreational activity, all of these things are critical
Hmm.
to being able to live with a sense of self-esteem and dignity. I always refer to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hmm.
And that's basically a theory that states it's like a pyramid, and we have these needs, and you can't get higher on the pyramid towards the pinnacle until all of the needs are met. And if safety and security, if that need is not met,
Hmm.
well, then you can't experience that need that we have for love and belonging. And you can't experience that need that we have for dignity and self esteem.
Hmm.
So sometimes out of that guilt and out of that duty, the adult children are actually enabling the older adult to live in this environment that's just not the healthiest environment that they can live in. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's something that I help families understand. I give them the freedom to say, hey, it's okay to have these conversations with your parents. And believe it or not, once the older adult actually makes the transition, they begin to thrive because the need of safety and security has finally been met. And I see that all the time.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that we realized when my mom was sick is things still need to happen around the house. Like we kept her at home. We did have caregivers come in. But the sheets need to get changed on the bed. Laundry needs to get done. The floors need to be cleaned. Like food needs to be made. And and that type of, when you are in a position where you're having mobility issues or having an Alzheimer, like having dementia, impact, like it takes those simple day-to-day tasks and makes them sometimes exponentially harder. And so the care increases, and you don't realize how just having those burdens of some of those things being done for you can just kind of relieve the pressure valve on that entire situation of stress. And that's a really important point. It increases the quality of life, not only for the person at the center of this, the elder, this older adult that needs the care, but also on the surrounding family members.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And when family members accept that, when they realize that this is going to be a more healthy alternative for their loved one, they can reclaim the role that they've played throughout that older adult's life as husband, as wife, as daughter, as son. And, and the label of caregiver takes a back seat.
Hmm.
And that transforms relationships. And it's just more healthy for the entire family
Yeah.
when those original roles are reestablished.
Yeah. I mean, grief there's an aspect of grief that roles change during that process. And this is, and you layer stress on top of that, and we don't behave as our best selves when we're under stress. And so if we look at it from that standpoint of we want what's best for our loved one, sometimes we're like the immediate family member that's at the center of stress and it's having trouble managing the stress, we're not going to show up as our best selves as well. And that can be hard. That is another aspect of like, it may not be the best option. So let's talk about some of the ways that you show up and help families with these difficult decisions. Like if you wanted to talk about a case study, uh, keeping in mind confidentiality, but maybe some of the typical things that you see families wrestling with or decisions that you've helped people to make.
Sure. The every single relationship with a client begins with a discovery call
Hmm.
and or just a discovery meeting. And we'll sit for an hour, sometimes longer, and I'll just listen to everything that's going on in that family's life.
Hmm.
And this is a really important part of the process because I never go into any of these meetings with a preconceived outcome. Um, and the most important thing in those discovery meetings, something that I try to do, is I try my best to get to know that older adult really well. It's best when the older adult's participating in the discovery meeting. Sometimes that's impossible because the older adult may be living with the dementia, and the family members just feel that it may not be appropriate for them to be participating in that conversation
Hmm.
at that particular time.
Hmm.
So that older adult is got to be at the center of any kind of decision making. And one of the big mistakes that I sometimes see families make is that it's all of the other family members that are doing the decision making, and they're talking past the older adult, not with the older adult.
Hmm.
And that's the top priority. So I spend my time trying to get to know, who is this person? What's their personality?
Hmm.
Um, what do they love doing? What gives them energy? What makes them happy? What gives them joy? And then we try to get into some of the details around why they've asked to meet with me. And that usually revolves around some care requirements. So, it could be a diagnosis of dementia. It could be recovery from a stroke. It could be lung disease. It could be heart disease. It could be something that's preventing that older adult from being able to fully take care of their lives. Sometimes the older adults in great health, but they're socially isolating.
Hmm.
And this could be a very vibrant person, somebody that was, always involved in social outings and loved to meet with people. And they've relegated their lives to social confinement where they're not seeing anybody all day long, and they're spending a lot of time watching television. And sometimes it's not just about there's a real care requirement. Sometimes it's about, well, let's address social isolation, which is one of the most dangerous things that an older adult can experience when they begin losing contact with friends and family members, social recreation, and all of that. So we have that discussion, and I get in, we begin talking about what the requirements are. And that's when I begin to say, well, there's all sorts of things that we can consider.
Hmm.
And, sometimes it's aging in place at home. And I'll go through, there's 5 things that you absolutely have to have in place in order to successfully age in place at home. And we'll make sure that they're aware of what those 5 things are. And
Hmm.
if they don't exist, well, then I'll introduce them to the resources that can provide those things that may be missing. And that would be great home care, home modification, food security, and a resilient family member. That's one of the most important things for successfully aging in place at home. You have to have somebody that's going to show up when the home care agency is no longer
Yeah.
there. And then, other times it's about senior living, and there's so many misconceptions about what senior living is, especially with older adults. There's sometimes a concept that senior living is a nursing home, and I have to help them understand that there's all different types of senior living, and it's active living. It's certainly not that. One of the most common phrases I hear from like an 87-year-old is, "Well, I don't want to go to a place where there's a bunch of old people." The person's 87 years old. So we help them understand that age is just a number, and you know, you can be as vibrant as you want to be. I mean, I've done tours with 102-year-olds where I can hardly keep up with them.
Yeah.
So, it's very different. So it's an education about all of these different options, and we don't have enough time on this discussion that we're having to go through the multitude of options that exist. And a lot of times I have to educate people about what's available to them in the state of Georgia.
Hmm. Yeah.
Every state's different, like when it comes to Medicaid and the different kinds of waivers, Medicaid waivers that the different states have. So a lot of times it's kind of helping them with some mythology that may exist and helping them understand what the reality is. Getting to know that older person's personality and making sure that we're fitting the right solutions to that older person's personality, and then educating them about all these different options and introducing them to the right kind of resources, like you, Desiree. Somebody that's such a phenomenal coach who can help people navigate these different um, transitions that they're going through in their life.
Yeah.
And you're
So
a phenomenal resource
thank you.
to
Thank you
people
so much.
like me in that area as well.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that this is really a different landscape, I think, than what we traditionally people have traditionally grown up with. Of there's so many more options there, like than there was in my childhood. Of these are senior care options. You're helping them deconstruct. Medicaid and Medicare can be overwhelming for folks that are not, it's a whole nother education. And so you're to helping them navigate that landscape with from an informed perspective where they're not starting from, having to go to uh having to gather all these resources and this knowledge and consume it. You can really help to guide them in that. And then also that you're taking into account the the real needs of the family and the person at the center of this need, to help them find the right puzzle piece, the right fit for their family and their personality and the type of life that they want to lead. So I see a
Yeah,
lot of value in that.
yeah. There's very, very real gaps that exist when it comes to elder care.
Hmm.
And I help families to bridge those gaps. And one of the things that you're speaking about is one of the major gaps that exists in the area of elder care, and that's the financial gap.
Hmm.
The vast majority of families that I work with believe that Medicare will pay for a lot more than it actually pays for. So, helping families to understand what Medicare covers and what Medicare doesn't cover is critically important because when we talk about the things that Medicare doesn't cover,
Hmm.
then we have to have discussions about, well, what will cover that? How do we pay for all that stuff that Medicare doesn't cover? And those are very, very important discussions. And the Medicaid waiver is just one solution that falls into that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's tons and tons of we certainly don't have enough time in these discussions, but
Well,
discussing all of these options and helping families to understand what's available to them based on the personality of their loved one is what
yeah.
it's all about.
Yeah, and the needs of whatever they're facing as they age. So Chris, how do folks find you? How do they stay in touch with you? How do they get up, on your calendar to have a discovery meeting with you?
And they can just call me directly. My phone
Okay.
number is 770-631-5923. But the best way to get a hold of me is to actually just go into Google Maps
Hmm.
and excuse me for just a
Okay.
second. So the best way for me to actually do it is to just go onto Google Maps and look up Senior Care Authority Atlanta.
Okay.
And they'll find my Google business page. And that will give them all of the information they'll ever need to know about me, all of my reviews. The Google reviews tell stories and they're anecdotes about elder care. And reading through those reviews, they'll find my website, they'll find my phone number, my email address, anything that they need to get a hold of.
Okay, and I'll also put a link in and include your phone number in the description under this video, so that if folks are in need of your services, they can certainly find you. And I just want to take a moment to thank you for taking this time with me this morning to talk about grief, to talk about elder care and how important it is, some of the tips to help families understand the landscape that's out there, and also to respect the dignity of this elder family member that they're caring for. So thank you so much. Any parting words?
No, Desiree, just thank you for inviting me here. This has been a very enjoyable conversation, as all my conversations are with you generally. So
Thank you.
thank you for having me, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much, Chris.